Hello everyone, I am the storyteller, and tonight I am here just to help you relax, to drift off to sleep by the sound of the waves, like the whispers of old souls. I know you have come to this video not just to hear the story, but also to find a deep, peaceful sleep. But before we begin, please gently like the video and subscribe to the channel so I can continue to tell you strange stories under the dim moonlight. Where are you from? And what time is it where you live? Just relax. Let your body relax. Put all your worries down by your pillow. Let me take you into a world of mysteries where the wind and the waves mingle, and unsolved mysteries are waiting to be told. Are you ready? Mariner of Innsmouth. I write this now from a hospital bed not far from my hometown. Though I am labeled delirious and force-fed medications whose names I cannot pronounce, do not believe that this testament is anything other than truth. It was 2 days ago, several miles away from the outer shelf reefs from the coast, when I was aboard a sailboat that drifted seemingly aimlessly over the waves. As the setting sun reflected its vibrant hue on the lapping crests, I, the schooner's sole passenger, leaned against a railing as I stared out across the waters. My name is Howard Phillips, and I was out on this solo sailing journey to find a new clarity in life. 3 days before was my father's funeral. My relationship with my father was a perplexing one. I looked up to and admired the man, but felt like I never really knew him too well. I found myself wondering about the conversations that would never be had, the beers never drank together, the lessons and the stories that would never be taught or told. After the funeral, I had expected to feel some clarity and peace, but instead found only distraught and confusion. And I now often wonder about my own life and where it could lead. I was left this small sailboat in the will, and I found it a sign of what to do next, and without a second thought, put everything else on hold, loaded up the boat, and sailed off into the unknown with the belief that I myself could be known. Now, with the currents pulling me ever outward from land, I treated this as an autopilot for the craft as I stared in a yearning way into the waters below. I watched as I saw a small school of fish swim by. Though I could not identify their breed, I mused at the occasional scaled adventurer who would jump from the water away from their brethren as they tasted the open air and observed a whole new alien world. I admired these displays and began to wonder if this was some metaphor from the universe I was meant to see, some natural guidance on my own mission for self-discovery. As I watched the fish surface to dance above the cresting waves, I felt I caught a glimpse of something further ahead in the water. It seemed like 2 orbs of crimson, as if 2 eyes were staring at me from below. But when I scanned the waters to better see these supposed eyes, they were nowhere to be found. I supposed whatever bigger fish they belonged to had swum away. Or, more practically, it was a trick of the light of the setting sun. As it distortedly emulated back to me, I shrugged away from the shimmering vision and turned to face the mast. As I did so, I saw a large onyx storm cloud approaching fast in the distance. I rushed to the wheel, yet was too late as the rushing gales moved at a seemingly supernatural speed, enclosing on and whirling the small boat in all directions as my vessel lurched aggressively to and fro. My only option was to cling to the railing for fear of losing myself to the now crushing waves which hurled against the sides of the sailboat like slapping tentacles of a great kraken. The schooner broached and was nearly knocked down. As I was raised into the air, I looked down at the opposite end of the boat and saw that the mast was nearly parallel to the water. I then peered into what I believed to be the murky depths below, except that with a flash of thunder, there appeared to be land not far below me. With that quick blaze of light, I witnessed an unending plain of putrid mud, amassed with the carcasses of decaying fish and horridly foul, less describable things protruding from the sludge. I thought I would feel relief by knowing there was land not far below should I capsize. But instead, an even stronger fear gripped me. A primal fear that whispered in my heart of the unknown horrors hidden beneath the waves. As the unknown, lurking darkness between the spaces of rot and decay beckoned for I to join it in eternity. I witnessed and experienced all of this and more in that split second in the boat's rocking, in that short burst of illumination. But now the ship had leveled out and rode the waves on the merciless winds, whose howls in my ears sounded more like mournful ghosts of all the lost sailors who fell to their watery graves in all the histories of man who came before me. On the horizon, I saw once again those dark crimson orbs from before, though now they rose from the waves instead of hiding beneath them, with churning waters to mark its rise to the surface. The thing slid into view above the dark waters. Those soulless eyes sat as two windows of malice against the face of a towering loathsomeness as it rose to face me. Two monstrous, scaly arms rose to cast in my direction. I turned my face and cowered in a squat huddle against my forlorn vessel, unable to hold my gaze upon the Goliath for fear of losing hold of my sanity. With my eyes squeezed shut and my whole self trembling, I prayed for release from the Leviathan's wake. The sailboat lurched again, this time with such force that I was knocked into the air and hurtled into the water. I felt the unsettling sensation of the sludged mire below, the masses of decay and putrid remains pouring over and surrounding me as I sunk deeper into the concoction of fetid slime and rotted scales which cut deep in my skin. I felt it seep into my nostrils and under my eyelids, and the groping carcasses felt like an incalculable sum of vengeful hands gripping me, pulling me deeper and deeper still into my shallow grave. My consciousness faded, and all went into nothingness around me. That's when I awoke next in a hospital near the coast. I don't know how I escaped, or what became of my father's boat. I only know I was found washed ashore, bruised and littered with abrasions. But I was alive. As I lay on my hospital bed, with no company but the memory of that nightmarish storm, I realized I had found the clarity for which I had set sail, though it was a clarity I would wish on no one, and wish only that we all could remain in our blissful ignorance of the truth. The truth that, as men, our place in this world is that of mere playthings on a board of cosmic proportions for being far beyond mortal comprehension. That the storm that man finds themselves trapped within is at the whims of those who rise from the deep. Diary of a Serial Killer. How might one endure the silent and secluded nature of winter? Be the bear. Enter a deep cave and dream, dream, dream. Jacqueline Suskin. I probably shouldn't be writing this, but oh fucking well. When the most precious thing lodged in your heart is ripped out and crushed by an unthinking alcoholic asshole driving with a revoked license, you do things, unimaginable things, and not just burying your beloved 8-year-old son, which was not on my shitty life bingo card, OVS, but life wasn't shitty before. The word should be capitalized. Before. No, better yet, the before, because now life was rent in two, forever separated by the gaping maw of rage. The before and the after, a fissure of overwhelming grief that quickly cracked, allowing the steaming, boiling lava to emerge from her core. Oh, he would pay. That drunken dickhead. His money won't protect him. Not from me. They gave her the code name Mama Bear, but he never imagined that she was holed up in a cave. On a hunch, he came out to the Pennsylvania woods at night, alone. Common sense and the FBI handbook would label his actions reckless at best and suicidal at worst, but he didn't fear for his safety. Mama Bear targeted a certain type of prey. Except for being a male, he didn't fit her profile. Funny. They were both profilers. October snuck up behind him, picking up the crisp air, tossing it around. Playing offense, it switched tactics, threw it toward his face, temporarily snatching his breath. He continued to climb, quiet, crunching under his boots, allowing the patches of clearing and the light of the frosted full moon to guide his steps. He'd reach the cave no matter what, so the easy way was the best way. He put his hand in his front pocket, felt the crumpled page of a diary. The paper crinkled like the fallen leaves underfoot. It was mailed to him at his office. This one, and the other entries. He had the sense to turn in the others, but not this one. Well, most of the others. She vowed to herself that she would abstain from killing for a month. Or so she wrote. By his accounts, it was day 30. He hoped her undated entry referred to October. At least he would have a day. One day. It was easier than I thought. I would say too easy. But that motherfucker mowed down my baby like a shirtless, beer-bellied jagoff hurrying to cut the grass before the Buccos game. Maybe it shouldn't be hard. Justice shouldn't be hard. Not in the semblance of a fair world. Leaves skittered and scurried around his legs, tumbling over each other like playing squirrels. He stopped, inhaled deeply. He loved the smell of fall, that last exhale of trees mixing with ripe decomposition. I'm so glad I live in a world of Octobers. He smiled at the memory of his sister, quoting Anne Shirley. Not so long ago, his smile fell. Not so long ago yet, forever ago. Tragedy has a way of altering time, elongating some parts and compressing others. He looked up through the lattice of bare limbs, a web of gnarled fingers, the indigo sky stitched with rhinestones. Did the stars foretell it? It was the mutable signs of the zodiac: Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces, BTK, Dahmer, Bundy, the ones born at the end of a season, not in the middle, like the fixed signs, like Scorpio, like her. You'd think one was enough, but it wasn't. I realized AA, alcoholic asshole, was just one of many. Sure, I settled my score. But what of the other moms? So many blights, diseases walking the earth, infecting others with their cruelty, their carelessness, their capriciousness. Someone had to bring order, just like Melville Dewey did to book classification. Sown to 99, he considered turning around to walk back down the hill. He turned, but didn't move. In the distance, the twinkling lights of downtown Pittsburgh weaved a terrestrial constellation of bridges, one-way traffic, and sundry skyscrapers. The Steel City, just like its people. Metal backbones, gritty guts, and honest hearts. He craved a sandwich from Primanti's. Any sandwich. That was the last time he saw her. At Primanti's, the original one, he wasn't one to second-guess himself. His mom drummed it into their heads from the cradle. Trust self first, last and only. First, last, only. Thanks to the internet and social media, it's not hard to find someone or their misdeeds. What was once relegated to a diary like this is now vomited onto Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube for all to see. Many lap it up, probably because it makes them feel less uncomfortable about their own stupid decisions and meaningless lives. Here for the mindless braggart. Many blowhards make for less research when it comes to this side gig. He cracked his neck, onward and upward, one foot in front of the other, crunching leaves, whipping wind, snapping twigs. Up, up, up he climbed. He was getting close. His hand reached towards his front pocket. Again, he read the page dozens of times, just like the rest. He couldn't help it. Just touching the decal-edged deanery page brought clarity and understanding. He had to find her first. Could it be that easy? I think this might be my last entry. I knew it was a bad idea. No, make that bad idea to write things down. But writers write. Fish swim, birds fly, dogs bark. Writers write. And mama bears? Well, unless you're bent from birth, looking at you, mutable signs. No one sets out to be a killer. Or, as I like to differentiate, a remover. Scrooge, Dickens, had it partly right. Decrease the surplus population. He just needed to add of assholes. Decrease the surplus population of assholes. Dangerous, foul, hollow assholes. He neared the ridge. He was getting close. He pulled out the wrinkled diary page. He couldn't help it. The moon illuminated the page, but he couldn't make out the words. Strange glyphs, occultic squiggles, just like those found on the astrological charts she used to interpret. Meaningless symbols to the untrained eye, but metaphysical gold to the mystic. He didn't need to be able to read the entry. He had it memorized, the cave. He could see the entrance, dark, yawning, an inky maw, just like her rage. He reached into the other pocket for his flashlight. She beat him to it. Her flashlight shone on the ground ahead so as not to blind him. Hey, sis. Hey, bro. What took you so long? Oh, unholy night. Iceland's winter festivities are a perfect excuse to feast and make merry, and I partake with an insatiable appetite. I adore the endless nights wandering abroad and relish chance encounters with hapless stragglers trudging home. They all laugh when I tell them carol singing's not to my taste, and chuckle when I say choristers are delightful and sweet. But how their mirth dissolves as I envelop them in my cloak and whisper, "What a toothsome treat you are. You're good enough to eat." I despise summer, like all cold-blooded creatures, preferring a catatonic sleep to roasting in the sun. Every autumn, I anticipate the evening when Ingvar disturbs my estivation, and I return to a nocturnal lifestyle. He disinters my casket from the family plot every year during the first week of December. It's a tradition my loyal retainer has followed for years, just like his father and his father's father, ad infinitum. It's impossible to find reliable help these days. And so, despite Ingvar's poor social skills, I re-employ his services annually. Ingvar obeys my written orders to the letter on the pain of death. If not in this life, then his neck. Thwack, crunch. My mind basks in a dream state when Ingvar invades my solitude, hacking through the icebound earth above. Crake, skreek. I hear the shovel scrape debris off the wooden lid, and his doleful voice murmuring a tuneless refrain. The unsettling melody stirs my clouded mind like a moorland breeze whistling through gnarled branches. Its clashing dissonances offend my refined musical sensibilities and cause my heart to quiver and contract. Lub, dub, lub, dub, lub, dub. My constricted arteries dilate as Ingvar wrenches at the coffin nails with his claw hammer. His frenzied efforts cause minor explosions in the darkness, dusting the threadbare silk lining with clouds of grit. As Ingvar prizes open the ancient pine lid, my sensitive eyeballs roll upwards, avoiding the moon's inquisitive gaze. My rib cage twitches in a violent spasm as wheezing lung sacs inhale clean air. I choke and splutter before coughing out stale fumes that rasp my withered throat like a rusty file. With each heartbeat, blood churns throughout my aching body, carrying oxygen to every cell. It's always the most painful part of my awakening. Pins and needles prickle each desiccated sinew, and every limb screams as it receives life-giving fluid. The blood returns to the heart after delivering oxygen, and my mind explodes with predatory thoughts anew. My throbbing heart sends the blood to lungs that strain hard to collect more air. I reflux and retch a pint of sticky phlegm from deep down. Ingvar is used to this unsightly reaction and tends to the detritus with a clean cloth. His caring touch is delicate and professional, and his face is unflinching. He lacks any sentiment. This is his business. Ingvar had strict instructions prior to my exhumation. He was to source a flask of fresh blood by whatever means necessary. The task never varies, but the source depends whereabouts I resume my existence. We're never in the same town twice, for obvious reasons. He's learned to adapt to my circumstances with undeniable efficiency. Ingvar has my best interests at heart, and he's also on the payroll. This winter season, he's moored our vessel in a quiet northwestern harbor outside Sudavik. It's an unassuming fishing town with a medical center and a venue for blood donors. Once on shore, he disguised himself and liberated a quart from their supply. It's a rich-looking concoction that will suffice for now. However, it's not the same as sinking my teeth into a warm jugular and slurping on the real deal. Ingvar steadies my quivering hands as I raise the glass container to my lips. I close my weary eyelids, and after a few sips, everything calms down. My sweaty palms dry out, and my prune-like fingers appear to elongate as my skin tightens. The sagging flesh under my jaw disappears, and my furrowed brow loses its careworn lines. At last, the throbbing pain behind my eyeballs dissipates, and my labored breathing settles into a regular rhythm. My once erratic heart beat chugs at a steady rate, and the queasiness in my stomach eases after a discharge of rancid gas. My rejuvenation is complete, and I rise from the coffin to assume my full height, like a magnificent butterfly casting off its shriveled chrysalis and unfurling its wings before flight. I nod at my retainer, and he tips his forelock and bows. I acknowledge his endeavors with a satisfied smile and survey the snowbound nightscape, glistening like an ocean of diamonds under the moon's bashful glow. Ingvar wafts his left hand through the air, shepherding me towards the waiting Broham with his outstretched right arm. Two majestic black drays snort white plumes from flared nostrils beside my handsome carriage. We take our seats as pristine snowflakes descend and settle on the bodywork's polished ebony. It's a fine welcome and a tremendous relief to be undead once more. The sight of my baleful old vehicle cantering through the small coastal town of Sudavik draws little attention. In previous years, the ominous rumble of hooves and creaking coach springs would herald an unfamiliar guest. But the inhabitants have other issues this year. They've entombed themselves within their homes, battened down their pine window shutters, and laced their thresholds with wreaths of protective herbs, ensuring plenty of garlics on hand. It should flatter me they fear the visit of a malevolent nocturnal predator. However, the precautions aren't for my sole benefit. The coronavirus's arrival has influenced behavior, and the government has enforced a lockdown. Ingvar understood there were unusual circumstances this year, but thought it prudent to interrupt my deep slumbers regardless. My initial reaction was one of joy. What better return could I expect than to discover piles of bodies waiting to be devoured? However, it transpires that the Health and Safety Department has issued an edict. Local undertakers are to dispose of the corpses through the crematorium. The local council is determined to sanitize the town and cleanse the region. I hadn't connected the hazy fug lingering above the coastline with the current climate of dread. Sudavik's furnaces are working overtime to dispose of the deceased. The impact on my festive plans is catastrophic. Citizens locked away in their homes until further notice. No bodies languishing on mortuary slabs waiting for morticians, and funerals performed in secrecy with the bereaved attending by Zoom. None of these scenarios bode well for a creature of my particular inclinations. I'll need to redraft Ingvar's commands with caveats that cater to similar events. A do not resuscitate clause should cover matters in the future. As for now, we'll retreat to the mountains, and I'll ponder the options. Iceland's 13 days of celebrations leading up to Christmas are a disaster for all the residents. Children won't be leaving shoes beside their open bedroom windows. There'll be no trolls gifting trick-or-treats this year. The authorities have banned the Yule lads' nightly visits. It's a bleak prospect all round. I have some tough decisions to make as we ascend to my mountaintop fortress. Most years, I'd prowl along local shores, searching for lonesome visitors and lost souls. My spirit descends into a quagmire as I contemplate the prospect of scouring isolated fjords for bilious vagrants and ill-kempt vagabonds. It seems unlikely that I'll quench my thirst this winter. The locals have barricaded themselves in their homes, and according to Ingvar, they're low on stock at the blood bank. As the days trickle past, the wind howls like a wounded banshee, and the ground hardens to rock. The snows gather in drifts, blocking our descent and jeopardizing my strategic movements. Ingvar spends his days grooming the horses, and at night he sips his supplies of Brennivin. Most evenings, he passes out from its effects, having buried himself under a mountain of furs. He knows his services are not required during these hard times, despite being primed to chauffeur me down the mountain on a whim. I've endured centuries of this existence. Life is relative, of course. It isn't a life most know. It's punishment for cheating death. Centuries of endless torture in purgatory. I'm cursed to roam forever, fearful of daylight, and all for a few drops of blood. I suppose it could be worse. There's a contagious disease in the vicinity. I guess it'd just be my luck if I contracted the coronavirus, wouldn't it? A year of coughing and wheezing inside my casket is inconceivable. The thought is most unappealing. And so, it's time to call it a night. Ingvar must enter my coffin until the epidemic's over. Maybe my luck will improve next year. The Pinch ELCV 28, Earth's last chance vessel 28, was slowing down after 5 months at elevated distance speed. The 3-person crew were starting to feel the pinch. The pinch, as it had become known, was the phenomenon whereby the greater the distance from Earth, the more the human heart and brain would become panicked, fatigued, strained, and lost, as though there was an invisible bungee attaching everyone's core to the planet. There wasn't yet an acceptable scientific explanation for this effect. But the crew of the ELC-28 were really feeling it. They had just crossed the 960 million kilometers from the Earth, heading perpendicular to the gravitational rotation of the solar system. "It's always worse going south," Carl said with a smirk, looking across the table at 2 distraught faces. "What do you mean, south?" Casper said angrily. "There is no south, north, east. west. Just black, black everywhere. Listen, I've been through this 7 times, Carl said, trying to keep his cool and maintain a sense of leadership. And that's another thing, Pearl said, getting drawn in by Casper's outrage. How can this be the last chance if there were already 27 previous last chances that have failed? The Earth's last chance missions had been funded globally and quickly established as the best chance of survival for the human race. Every nation had poured all of their resources and remaining workforce into it. Since it had been scientifically established 50 years prior that humanity would not survive much beyond 3397 on its current trajectory without finding another safe, inhabitable planet or a source of infinitely extractable energy. It was a question that had floated between Casper and Pearl for some time now. What had happened to the previous 27? And how had Carl come back every time? The first 15 ELC missions had been manned by larger and more experienced crews. By the 20th, there was no time to train anyone to the standard that was required. By this point, people were mandatorily encouraged to join a crew in a variety of ways. Shorter prison sentences, the promise of financial security for their extended family, and the knowledge they may be helping the survival of the human race as a whole. But it was becoming ever harder to recruit new people. Pearl was a space cadet in her 20s before the sudden, unexpected, and overwhelming societal dread. Now she wanted to volunteer in the hopes her kids might survive. Casper had some experience as an astronaut before being forcibly ejected after jeopardizing a mission due to drug use aboard the ship 5 years prior. He had been court-martialed, but promised a complete pardon if he volunteered for the ELC missions. Think yourselves lucky, Carl said. The first 3 missions I was on had 10-person crews, then 6. Now we're down to 3. It's much easier this way. More food, more room. All we have to do now is locate the BL hip and choose who's going in first. The BL hip, black hole with inversion potential, was a discovery made in the year 2868. A micro black hole, less than 300 microns in diameter, could, with the right equipment, be inverted to create a temporary door in space, which could theoretically lead anywhere. The hardest part was locating the BLH EPS. The ELCV-28 was the furthest any ELC had had to travel so far, and it was understood that the effect of the pinch could be life-threatening beyond 1,000 million Cullen. The first attempt to send anything through a BLA chip in 2950 was an automated sensor-packed bot. But the bots would only be able to communicate data back to the vessel for a maximum of 20 minutes before losing all connection. It was later deemed more cost-effective to attempt to send humans through, with the hope of reopening the door for them to return with any data collected. This was soon stopped after 5 failed missions, as it was believed inhumane, as the participants were never heard from again after entering the BLA chip until the recent determination of the definitive extinction of the human race. "Do you ever go first?" Casper said cynically. "Well, no, not so far." Carl defensively shot back. "Listen, like it or not, I am the captain on this ship. I have the most experience, and I'll have to be here to guide us home." "Guide one of us home," Pearl said. "Only you and one of us have any hope of making it home, right?" When she said home, her voice cracked sorrowfully. "Look, you have to fight the effects of the pinch. I know it's getting to us all, but if we let it, we'll end up like ELCV9. And no one wants that." "What happened on ELCV9? asked Casper. "Let's just say they never made it to the BL hip," said Carl. "The only reason I'm able to deal with the pinch is because I've done this so many times. I'm used to it now, and I know how to keep myself together. But rest assured, I'm feeling it too. This is the furthest I've been, and it's starting to put a strain on me." "So you've never been in a BL hip? But you're happy to send us in, knowing we won't come back out," Pearl said, with a sense of righteous outrage. "Oh, I've been in, Pearl," said Carl. "Do you think they'd let me lead these missions if I'd never been in? And people come out all the time when there's nothing on the other side worth exploring. And if they're quick enough to realize that fact and get back through the BL hip before it closes." "What was it like on the other side?" Pearl asked skeptically. "Black, just black," Carl said. "Zeus scanner deployment. The standard procedure is to send through a scanner bot to establish the chances of anything worth exploring before sending in a human. The data received back from the bots is usually minimal, and often scrambled to the point that it's not 100% reliable. Then humans go through anyway." "Okay, Casper, you can pilot the scanner. Just remember, the beam can only hold the BH lip open for 5 minutes, so get yourself perfectly lined up," Carl commanded. Casper sat facing the controls for the scanner and began maneuvering it into place. "If I'm doing this part, that means I'm not the first one going in, right?" Casper insisted. "Afraid that's not how it works, Casp," Carl said firmly. The scanner was guided through the 5-meter hole in space. The hole that had opened wasn't black, as Casper and Pearl were expecting, but an iridescent glow of pink and purple. Beautiful and mesmerizing, yet somehow off-putting, like oil in a puddle. Pearl and Casper had returned to sitting in the recreational dining area of the ship, while Carl pored over the scanner results. After 45 minutes, Carl walked in. "Okay, do you want the good news or the bad news?" Carl said, smiling. "What the hell does that mean?" Casper reacted angrily. "Keep a handle on the pinch," Carl said calmly. "No need to start losing it over every little thing." "Okay, The good news is there is a strong reading of biological and atmospheric conditions within an area reachable in a solo flight suit. The solo flight suits were designed for independent space travel with built-in directable propulsion and terrestrial landing capability. They had a range of up to 190,000 kilometers so in an open space, but don't have the power or propulsion to lift off once within the gravitational influence of a planet. And the bad news? Asked Pearl. The bad news is that one of you two is going to have to go in and try to reach it, and report back anything you find, Carl said glumly. But not you? Casper said, red in the face. Casper, we've been through this, Carl said tiredly. The important thing is that as soon as you touch down, you report back with as much information as you can gather. On your communicator, keep in mind you may only have minutes before the BL hip closes. So who decides who goes in? Pearl asks. Well, I'll give you both 30 minutes. And if neither of you have decided, I'll decide, Carl said matter-of-factly. Carl left them both sitting across from each other at the dining table and retreated to the cockpit, keeping an ear out for any overreactive arguments. Carl knew that this was the time that anger had spilt over into violence in the past. His mind recollected the stories he'd heard about ELCV9 and shuddered. Not on my watch, Carl thought to himself. So do you want to go in first? Pearl said, trying to maintain a tone of civil diplomacy. I mean, let's face it, we're probably both going in eventually. I take it from your tone that you're not going to volunteer yourself, and that you want me to want to go in to alleviate your conscience, Casper responded calmly, but with an air of arrogance. And next, I expect you'll bring up your children and talk about how much you would love to see them again, to try to guilt me into doing the right thing. Only the right thing, in this context, just happens to be the thing that you want. Casper's tone was becoming increasingly aggravated. Fine, I'll go first, Pearl said. Carl, who'd been listening the whole time through the ship's wall, walked into the dining area with authority. Okay, I've decided, Pearl. As Casper said, we both understand that you're probably desperate to see your kids again. But for that to happen, you will have to go in. And Casper, if Pearl goes in first, you will be right behind her, no matter what, Carl said, remembering his training. Okay, fine. I'll go first, Casper said. Good choice, Carl said, looking proudly at Casper. X first entry. Casper suited up and stepped out of the ship's airlock. Carl and Pearl watched from the cockpit window as he powered towards the glowing hole in space. They watched as Casper fearlessly approached and slipped through. Are you hearing me, Casper? Carl spoke into the ship's communicator. What do you see? I can hear you all right, Casper said, with an excitable inflection. All sounds of the pinch had gone from his voice. Woo! It's beautiful. What sort of planet is it? Carl asked. Nothing came back from the communicator for what felt like hours, but was only minutes. It's just like Carl heard eventually, followed by a long, drawn-out beep. "What did he say?" Pearl asked in an excitable tone. "It's just like I—" And then it cut off. Carl answered. "Just like what?" Pearls said, frustrated. "I don't know." Carl responded. "Let's listen to it back again." Carl replayed the message. "It's just like Ira," came out of the machine. Pearl said, puzzled. What? Recognize? Remember? You're going to have to go in after him, Pearl," Carl said, looking back at her. "And you'll follow, right?" Pearl said pleadingly. "Of course, I'm not going to miss another opportunity," Carl said. "What does that mean?" Pearl asked, frowning. "It wasn't just black, the one you went through. Was it, Carl? You were just too afraid to make landfall because you knew that would be a one-way ticket." Carl looked down, ashamed. "It wasn't as simple as that," Carl said. "There are lots of planets that can come back with breathable atmospheres on the scanners. But when people go through, it's a death trap. The one I saw when I went through was not right. The sky was orange, and the land was black. I knew straight away that if I touched down, I'd never be coming back." "So you were scared," Pearl scoffed. "And yet you've sent plenty of scared people to their deaths. How do you know this one will be any different? And yet you are more than happy to send me through." Casper said, "It's beautiful." "Do you think he would have said that if it didn't at least look safe?" Carl said encouragingly. "The BL hip will stay open long enough for you to establish a connection with Casper. He should have made landfall by now if it's safe. And you'll know if you should turn back. And you can come straight back through. Ix landfall." With that, Pearl suited up and reluctantly entered. Carl sat waiting, watching, and trying to calculate how long it might take for Pearl to communicate with Casper, and how long he'd have before the BL hip would close. "Anything from Casper?" Carl asked nervously through the communicator. "Is he alive?" A long pause. "Wait, he's talking," Pearl said. "He's ranting and raving. I can barely make it out." Another long pause. "He says it's Ert," Pearl said. With that, the BL hip closed suddenly. Carl sunk his head into his hands in despair. "It's Earth?" Carl thought. Was that what Casper was saying? It can't be. There are no BL hips that close to Earth. I would know. Unless one has formed since we've been traveling. Or maybe a new BL hip is created when we travel, though? Nobody knows for sure. Carl thought. He sat and dwelled on this new information for some time. He could wait for Pearl to make landfall, then travel through. But if Casper was wrong, then he, Pearl, and the ship would all be lost. And if he was right, and it was, in fact, Earth, all that's been achieved is finding a shortcut back home. Still would have lost the ship, and the Earth would still be on a collision course with annihilation. But at least he would have proven himself courageous enough to follow the crew through a BL hip, or he could open the BL hip right now in the hopes he could at least save Pearl before she attempts to land. But save her how? We're all dead either way. If I bring her back on board, we'll just head back to Earth with no confirmed news of salvation. Carl was distraught and angry with his inability to think clearly. He was supposed to be the one to keep a clear head and make firm decisions. Damn pinch, Carl thought. Carl opens the BL hip and tries to establish a connection with Pearl on the communicator. It's taking too long, Carl thinks. Suddenly, he can hear Pearl's breathing coming through. Pearl, how far are you from landfall? There's not much time. Carl shouts through the mic quickly. I'm within the gravitational pull now, Pearl says excitedly. Casper's on the ground and he's breathing without his suit. He says it's safe. Send a message home. Carl quickly uses the onboard computer to send a message back to Earth. This is ELCV-28. We've found a new home, location details included. Begin the evacuation process. Carl hits send and prays that was the right decision. He climbs into his suit and heads towards the BLH hip. This is it. He thinks. Carl gets through just as Pearl is making landfall. How was the descent? Carl asks. Fine. Not much in the way of clear landing areas. Pearl's responds. A lot of flora and fauna where I am. Flora and fauna? Carl says. That doesn't sound like the Earth I remember. Have you got a connection with Casper? No, his communicator cut off abruptly about a few seconds ago, Pearl said, concerned. I'm going to de-suit now. Carl tried to establish a connection with Casper, but nothing but static came through. How's the air? Carl asked. Clean, weirdly clean, Pearl said, taking deep breaths. Carl was getting close to the inescapable gravitational pull of the planet. He soaked up the beauty of this vantage point. It looked like Earth, green land and sun and oceans. Carl couldn't contain his excitement, but something was different. Carl didn't recognize any of the continents. A scream pierced Carl's ears through his communicator. Then Pearl's voice came through panicked. Carl, turn back now. Get back to the ship and send another message to home. This is not Earth. This is not a safe planet. All that followed was screaming, the sounds of bones crunching, and a strange, savage, terrifying, deep roar. Carl checked the altimeter on his suit. Now entering inescapable gravity. He's right behind you. We'd go out around one, climbing through bedroom windows. We'd try to land softly on bushes and backyard lawns. Some of us went barefoot. Some hid a spare pair of sneakers under porches or tucked under tarps used for covering patio furniture. Some of us just liked being barefoot. It made us feel as though we'd have the strength that comes from mimicking the uncivilized. Some of us would play the whole game with no shoes. No shoes, no shirts. One of us liked to play the game in only his boxer shorts. He would dare anyone to mention his near nakedness. I'm not gay for running around the woods in my underwear. You're all gay for looking at me in my underwear. This is teenage logic. Everything is a chess match where both players have only recently discovered how to play Monopoly. Board games were daytime affairs. We would play them by the above-ground pools and in basements while our parents were at work. We were old enough to be home alone, provided we memorized the phone numbers of all the retired neighbors who could, theoretically, get to us quickly in the event of an emergency. Practically speaking, 70-year-old Mrs. Hasher would not have been able to help any of us had a deranged murderer targeted us the way they did in the cable movies we weren't supposed to watch. But our parents told themselves stories the same way we did. Stories about safety. Stories about good neighborhoods. Stories about how much a locked door could accomplish. Years ago, a girl had been abducted from her home on our street. But the rumor was she opened the door when a stranger knocked. Our parents didn't say it, but they secretly believed that meant she deserved to be kidnapped. I mean, if your kid is dumb enough to open up the door for just anybody, they told themselves that we, their children, were smarter than that. Smarter than that girl. We were not smarter. We were, in fact, a lot dumber than her. Of course, we didn't know that. We thought we were geniuses. Genius, warrior, punks with wisdom and ferocity, and all before our 15th birthday. We believed people were jealous of us, but we didn't know who these people might be. We believed that everyone at school had gone to at least second base, and we were ashamed to have never seen a naked girl in real life. We laughed at the word condom, but we believed, given the opportunity, that we would be intrinsically fantastic at lovemaking. At school, we had posters in our locker of Sarah Michelle Gellar and Jennifer Love Hewitt, and those of us who had gone to first base had that one poster of Cameron Diaz that would have gotten us suspended if a teacher saw it. We'd gather at each other's lockers and discuss the arrangements for the game that night. We'd agree on a spot in the woods. Some of us liked meeting at the tree that had been split in half by lighting. Some liked the rock formation that resembled an old man kneeling with his head down. Once the location was agreed upon, we'd argue about the time. Some of us wanted to meet at midnight on the dot. We didn't realize that we were in love with the poetry of it, because we swore we hated poetry based on what our teachers had us read. Some wanted to do it later, much later. Some wanted to meet at 3 or 4 so that the game would last until dawn. Tomorrow's Saturday. We don't have school. What's the problem? The problem was that some of our parents got up around dawn. Some of our mothers would have a heart attack if they woke up and found our beds empty. Some of us didn't want to worry our parents. Some of our fathers used a belt if we misbehaved. Some of us cared about our parents too much to let them know what their children were up to at night. Some of us feared our parents more than we feared anything in the woods. Some of us feared nothing. Some of us loved the idea of being gone when our parents woke up, making them think that we'd escaped, that we were on a runway train somewhere, moving further and further away from them. Some of us liked the feeling of the belt on our skin because it solidified the hate we felt for the people we were meant to love the hardest. We'd usually meet a little after 1. If it was warm out, we'd meet by the lake where the summer camp used to be until it went out of business. The cabins were still there, and the picnic tables, and the signs that said mess hall and nurse's office. The paint on the signs was fading. Vines were growing over the cabin windows. We didn't explore the camp at night. Even the bravest among us weren't that fearless. We'd seen at least one horror movie that took place at a camp, and we didn't want to be chased by a man with a mask. We only wanted to play a game. In our game, if you followed the rules, you didn't get hurt. Nothing bad happened. If you broke the rules, the game was over for you. But that was it. No injuries, no harm. It was all about stamina, sustaining yourself throughout the night. There wasn't really any loss. There wasn't even a real way to win. Bragging rights were all we had to play for, and yet they seemed more valuable than the $100 bills our fathers would leave out on the kitchen counter as though tempting us to steal. Some of us did steal. Some of us felt the belt. Some of us liked it. But we'd never say who. We started by the lake, and we faced off against each other, eye to eye with another boy standing a foot away from you. That was how it began. We would face each other, take a deep breath, and say, "He's right behind you." One of us would say it. The other would listen. Then the other person would say it. "He's right behind you." And we would escalate the intensity. The rule was that you could not say anything other than those 4 words, but you could say them however you liked. We could shout them at each other. We could whisper them. Those of us who were more strategic knew that volume wasn't enough. It was about having an action, an objective. It was important to keep a verb in mind: beg, cajole, beseech, caution, plead, convince, convince, convince. He's right behind you. It didn't matter that we played this game several times a week for 2 years. It didn't matter that we knew that nobody was behind us. Inevitably, someone would get spooked. One of us would run home. That first hint of terror was contagious. Soon, more of us would be retreating back to our homes. It was rare that more than 3 or 4 of us would be left by the end of the night. If your partner ran away, you would find someone else who had also lost their partner, and you would face off against them, speaking the 4 words. If you were the only one without a partner, you stood silently and waited for someone to leave. Like most boys our age, we had no respect for anything we were meant to respect, and the utmost respect for imaginary things and made-up scenarios, school and church and authority and death were all laughable to us. But this game that we had created out of nothing, this was something to be taken seriously. None of us could remember who started it. Maybe an older boy who had since graduated from childishly sneaking out of his room at night. Maybe we all put it together like a story composed of hormones and dirty sweat. Maybe it didn't matter. All that mattered was keeping it alive for as long as we could. We never spoke of the game outside of planning it between classes at our lockers. We never talked about who was good at it or bad at it. We never talked about who stayed the longest or who left first. We just played. We played, and we never planned to stop playing. One night, one of us was staring at his partner when he saw the other boy's eyes look slightly to the left. This was against the rules. You only looked at your partner. You used the 4 words to scare them, if you could. You didn't involve physicality, not even a slight shift in focus. The other boy began to shake his head. This was wrong. This was against the rules. None of us knew what to do if someone broke the rules, because nobody had ever broken the rules. There were no referees, and even if there were, it wouldn't have mattered now, because there were only 2 boys left on that night. The other boy appeared to almost choke. He coughed out the words, "He's right behind you." The other boy looked as though he was going to raise an arm, raise a hand, point to something. Instead, he ran off. The other boy wasn't supposed to run off. You were supposed to wait until the other person said the 4 words. You were supposed to give them a chance to scare you back. One of us stood there that night, all alone, and felt an immense pride extending down his shoulders and off into the ground below his feet. He was the only one left. A laugh barked past his lips. It was a nervous laugh, but he didn't know where the nerves were coming from, and he wondered if he could get home before his father banged on his door to wake him up for school. If not, it would be the belt. But did that mean anything? He was the last one of us still standing there in the woods. "He's right behind me." He didn't know why he said it. It wasn't true. There was nobody behind him. Every sound was natural. Every presence an imagined one. Every instinct to flee was his paranoia trying to torment him, now that all his fellow competitors were gone. He would stand in the woods for as long as he liked. He would enjoy this moment. Despite winning nothing, He would tell himself he was a winner. He was no longer one of us. He was someone else. He's right behind me, but the game was over. There was nobody left to scare.